Dave Sudia's ADHD story, which is also a bipolar story, includes ups, it includes downs, it includes lots of twists and turns that many of us that face these challenges have gone through. Dave reinvented himself getting into programming because of doing a boot camp when he lost his job. He's also gone through different periods of time, on medication, off medication, finding different results. Most of all, he's a really intelligent, creative person with a great heart, and I'm pretty sure you're going to like this interview. So, ADHme, we are here today with Dave Sudia. He's an amazing person who I've interacted with because of common projects in the CNCF. We crossed paths because of Kubaroki,
yes,
inside KubeCon.
And also you just having instruments in the lounge, and
that's true. We also jammed.
Yeah,
about that. A lot happened. Anyway, Dave, how are you doing? Nice to have you with us today.
I'm good, man. I'm good. How about you?
Good. That being said, let's just dive right into it. How did your ADHD story start? You were quite young, I believe, right?
Yeah, I got diagnosed when I was 8. I was the classic kid in the mid 90s, and like bright but can't focus or get anything done in school. And so I got diagnosed when I was 8, got put on Ritalin. That's a mixed bag story there. Happy to talk about it, but basically, yeah, it was that, and then, just lots of ups and downs with it, going through adulthood. So I was taking medication. The Ritalin made me extremely anxious, and by the time I was in middle school, late middle school, I was on, Ritalin plus imipramine for the anxiety, and then plus Paxil for the depression, and just kind of like that chain of medication that seemed to be the thing that psychiatrists did at the time. I think just because of a lack of other tools, right? Like Adderall wasn't around yet. Adderall came around when I was in high school, but I basically I completely bombed out of high school. California thankfully has this test you can take called the California High School Proficiency Exam, and you can take it when you're 16 or in the second semester of your sophomore year. And so I proficiency'd out of high school, and then went completely off all of the medications and just undecompressed for about 7 years. And then ended up, getting my life back together and going back to college late, having a very non-traditional college experience. And then, but yeah, in my early 20s, I was kind of ready to approach it again. And so by that time, Adderall was around. I went on Adderall. Adderall ended up working out really well for me, and got through college and professionalism with that. And that's kind of been that story for the last 17 years.
With that in mind, and it seems like, we'll be touching on the medication aspect, which is an important part of the conversation, I think, for anybody, is that, what's best for you. Some maybe it's, time and place.
Yeah.
Also the feeling
totally.
that, in my case, just, speaking freely, is that, the feeling of something is prescribed to me by a medical professional, and I'm being told that this is going to work. And then I have the feeling that it's not working, wanting to have open conversations with a psychiatrist, but also sometimes saying, what, this simply can't be right for me. And it's conflictive because you're in the process of trying to make something better. You feel like you are the obstacle, or you don't know what the obstacle is. I don't know if that's been similar in your case, or if you have anything you'd like to share in that regard.
Yeah, medication's a journey, and I'm actually going on that journey again right now. And like I said, we can talk about this more in depth later, but with the current Adderall shortage in the United States, I'm back on that journey of trying to find the right medication, since Adderall is impossible to find. And I happen to have a niece staying with me right now who has ADHD, and she's also been diagnosed with dyslexia. And everyone around her is having the same conversation with her about, you need to be taking medication. Look, because she did the same thing. She took a medication. It didn't work. She didn't like how she didn't feel like herself on it. And I straight up told her, I was like, it's a journey. And if that's not a journey you feel like going on at this moment, get through school in whatever way you can. And life is long. And, and you can go on that journey when you're ready to go on that journey, because it takes a lot of work with a doctor you trust, to get through it.
Yep, agreed. And I felt like I needed to have either asked a lot of questions, or needed to have been given more information, or needed to have read up more when I was starting up, because it's not as simple as just, oh, I just pop this and then I start going through my day. Nope. Your body goes through an adaptation process. Everybody's different. I'm a big coffee fan. And so caffeine and stimulants mixing together, that becomes a little bit problematic. So like I said, there are a lot of different things to be taken into account. I also think that while it is an important part of the conversation, there are other parts that, like you said, are important too, that there are other ways to get through high school apart from just medication. And and like you said previously, given the ups and downs, a very common thread in all the conversations in this podcast have been about build self-kindness into your life because you're going to need it. And I think everybody should, whether they have ADHD or not. But it's such an integral part of the process because it's going to be there's going to be trial and error. There are going to be moments of difficulty. Now let's bring it back though to your experience. You get through college, but what were some of the things, what were some of the symptoms that you faced? And then, there was a sort of breakthrough moment, I believe, once you got out of college and started working. But take us up to that point. What were some of the challenges that you were facing? And then walk us through that moment that you had, I think, when you were 24.
Yeah, totally. So, and I'm gonna couch all this in something that I only learned when I was 33, which is that I also have bipolar disorder. And so I didn't get that diagnosis till really late. And the diagnosis I got was something called cyclothymia, which is basically mild bipolar that tends towards mania. Pardon me, I've got some allergies. And the way my psychiatrist put it to me is, no one ever comes to a psychiatrist for this because it feels great. And basically it's like in my teens, but so you take ADHD and bipolar that tends towards mania, and I just was always on, right? Like, and that's my natural state, is to be on, like to be on 4 to 5 hours of sleep a night, if that. Regular nights where I do not sleep, and then every 3 weeks I just crash out for 4 days. That's my body's natural cycle, and I got that. I only had to deal with that when I had a child. And so like the things I faced were like an overabundance of enthusiasm that was off-putting. And until you find the right people who can deal with that. I married my wife 9 months after I met her when I was 21. 22 when we got married, because I was just like, I'm in, Yeah. But for a lot of people, that was not as great. And so I think it's like, as we talk about different ways to cope, right? There were places in which that worked really well. I was an excellent server at restaurants, right? Like I was highly attentive, you're binging and banging between all the different tables you need to get to. And, it's like that scenario is almost perfect for that need to like, oh, that thing needs my attention. Oh, that's now stimulating, right? But in any other scenario, I was kind of useless, right? And never knew what day it was, never knew what time it was. And so, I think there's almost something very zen about that. Like you're very in the moment, but being that way all the time, then you just, time passes and you just don't even realize how much time has passed. I had no long-term plans of any kind beyond whatever I was most stimulating in the moment. Right. And so, so there was a point at which I couldn't do that anymore. And really, I mean, it wasn't as profound as that, but it was basically like I was serving restaurants and I had a night where I got 3 $5 tips on $150 plus tables just because the people were cheap. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I want to acknowledge like the incredible amount of privilege that I have in my life. My mom's a dentist, and I basically was able to call her and be like, because she had offered me a job, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And then at a certain point, I was like, yes, I'll take it, whatever. I just don't want to do this anymore. And that is, like being able to get bailed out by your parents by them giving you a job is a massive, massive privilege. So
one which I've enjoyed as well. And whether or not I used it, I knew it was always there, and tacitly in one way or another.
Yeah. And so I went to work for her, and again, that what that did initially was it just gave me enough structure and stability to then recognize other improvements I wanted to make, right? Like I suddenly wasn't living hour to hour. I was living day to day or week to week. And not even in a money way. I mean, like, the money wasn't wasn't paying me an incredible amount of money, but it was just the structure of the day, right? It wasn't like, oh, well, you might have this shift then, you might have these hours then, and so in that job, I was then able to be like, I'm getting some things done, but gosh, I'd really like to be like more effective at what I do. And like, I'd like to be able to concentrate better, on these things. And so that was when I was like, I think I'd like to go back and try medication again. I tried medication again. From there, I met my wife and I was like, I think I want to go back to college. And so I did night school at University of Phoenix, and it's a degree, that allowed me to, it wasn't much worth itself, but it got me into other things. And so eventually I ended up, I graduated college directly into the recession, and
Likewise. Yeah.
yeah. And
2008 for the young people that are out there.
yeah, with a degree in marketing from University of Phoenix. So that was basically worthless at the time.
Oh, mine was in religious studies, but so
Yeah.
the same thing.
And so I thought, okay, what do I want to do next? And I thought, well, I'm now in a place where my life is pretty stable. I've figured some things out. I don't think I know everything, but so I decided to get a master's degree in special education and go into special education and work with kids who have, try to make my way towards working kids with ADHD. And so in my first semester, I was actually working as a paraprofessional and aide in a self-contained classroom for kids with really severe autism. And we got put in a professional development course that was just a phone seminar with Russell Barkley, who's written a bunch of books on ADHD. And the life-changing phrase, so I'm already at this point, I'm 24, I've been on and off and on medication. I think I've got my ADHD, kind of tackled pretty well. And he said, the entire thing, the name of ADHD is a misnomer, attention deficit. It's not a deficit of attention. It's a deficit of ability to choose what you attend to. And I was just went, oh, my life makes sense. Because my dad's problem, my dad totally has ADHD and doesn't acknowledge it. But his issue with me as a kid is, why can he read Calvin and Hobbes for 4 straight hours but not do his homework, right? And it was, it's that oxymoron of like, the people with ADHD can hyper focus, right? And which I'm sure people have talked about on the podcast before. And so that was just what that did for me, was it allowed me to unlock strategies around wrangling it, right? Of like, oh, if the trick here is I'm going to respond to the most stimulating thing, whether that's external or internal, then I just need to surround myself with the correct stimuli, right? And so like later in my career as a teacher, as a special ed teacher, I wasn't on the bell schedule, right? Like I had 17 alarms that went off every day, right? Like, and I ended up, for a lot of people did this, but it's like, I'm not saying I'm unique here, but like I got really into the David Allen's Getting Things Done, because it was like, oh, the thing that attracted me to it was I spend 2 hours a week thinking hard, and then I spend the rest of the week doing it, right? But I think the extra step I went there was like, but I'm not going to remember to look at the to-do list, right? And so it's like, so then I had to build in these extra things of the pings that would go off. There was this magical period when the iPhone came out, like for the first 3 years, where there was a shared calendar and alarms, but not much else. Not social media could completely taken over on it, and all of the people hadn't really figured out how to like steal your attention, where it was like this super useful tool of, it was just the external stimuli I needed to actually be on track. So that was the big thing, was just realizing, again, medication, even Adderall worked fantastic for me. It still only went so far, right? And it only lasts for so long. And I've gone through many phases with the Adderall, even finding a medication that worked, of, well, now I'm really great at work, but I'm not doing my budget at home when I get home at night. What do I do about that? Right. And then even going so far as then getting the bipolar diagnosis, and my psychiatrist saying, well, you've got bipolar disorder and it's manic, and we've been putting you on stimulants your whole life. There's a reason you don't sleep. And so, having to adjust it there, to not take it after noon, right? So, which then again limited how useful it was in the evening. where you still have to come up with environmental strategies, environmental aids. You still have to have those things that are useful, universal, whether or not you are on or are taking the right medication.
Yep. Wow. So I think several things in there, the sort of the inevitable trade-offs that are going to be there, and that there's no silver bullet, whether it's with medication or other strategies. And once again, that's why I say, building on self-kindness and acceptance into the process, because as the thing is, in my case, is like, okay, diagnosis, as a person who likes to resolve things quickly in general, I'm going to dive into this and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to fix it. That's it. This is a problem that has to be fixed, because that's the mentality, right? There's a problem that has to be fixed, rather than there has to be a level of understanding, and that this is not like any old problem, I need to lose weight, I'm going to exercise a bunch. Unfortunately, the solutions just aren't that black and white. And having done combination of therapy with different therapists, and that was a process, and then the medication side of things, and one of the best things I would say by far has been this podcast, is talking to other people who have been in, and so you don't feel, oh look, an alarm going off.
The most appropriate thing for this podcast.
Exactly. Probably get 16 other notifications about things I have to do. And, the constant thing is, trying all these different apps or these to-do lists or these to-do, sort of things. And I've tried several different things, and some have worked better than others. And other people saying as well, as much as something works, eventually it sort of wears off, or you get bored with it, and, establishing routines. In your case, though, you've worked, I want to take this now a little bit more to the work side.
Sure.
You tell me a little bit more about, your career development. You were working as, special education teacher. I think that's really cool too, like having interacted with folks that were neurodiverse. Maybe some things that you got to see, of yourself when you were younger, about some of the things that we're going through. Also, how things have changed in terms of access to resources. My brother has worked in special education for years. My partner has also worked in special education. It's different in different countries. But I want to know more, like, your career development, how this is related to someone who got their degree, going to night school, then getting a master's in special education, and then you find yourself working in tech. How did that happen?
Yeah. So did night school. And so, again, I think that's part of I was able to harness, like you said, my psychiatrist said, knowing it comes from my form of bipolar disorder, like, I just being on all the time let me work, come home, do a bunch of papers, go, like hyper focus on that, because it was, and I think University of Phoenix ended up being the perfect venue for me, because you take one class at a time and the classes are 5 weeks long. And so it's just like, I'm all in on this topic for 5 weeks and then we move on. And so, it was like, I'm going to read the whole textbook in 5 weeks and you don't have time to get bored. And so it's like, you are immersed in one topic at a time. And then my master's degree, was a little, it was a professional program. Basically, they placed you in schools. I was working as a paraprofessional and later as a full-fledged teacher. And I think in a slightly better way than a program like Teach for America, where it's like, whatever your degree is, well, now you're a teacher, right? And I was getting the professional teacher education.
I worked with a lot of Teach for America folks, and it was kind of like, go figure it out.
Yeah, and I at least had the resources of the university program I was in. There was still a little bit of like, go figure it out, but I had the fallback of like taking the courses while I was doing it.
Yeah,
and having access to those people. But yeah, so that was done at night still. Like, they actually had like screen setups at the schools we were placed at, and so like the school day would end and we'd have some prep time, and then we'd go to class basically on campus at the like elementary or middle school we were at, and do the course remotely, just even though it was all in the Phoenix area. So yeah, I mean, I think my reflection on my time in education is that I was a great teacher and I was still bad at school. And I eventually I used the coping mechanisms I had to get my legally mandated IEPs done on time, and I never broke the law. And I think there are a lot of differences from when I was in school. I mean, I'm going to make no excuses or apologies for the state of the U.S. public school system, and that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. But there was a lot more understanding, especially in the places I was at, even in the places where there was less, there was more, and I ran So I ended up, the place I ended up specializing was severe emotional and behavioral disorders. So I had the kids who were abused or just had natural, emotional disabilities and bipolar disorder or autism that was high functioning, that didn't require like a severe autism program. And yeah, I mean, in a middle school, I ran a self-contained program, which means I had all the kids in one room, which is the worst way to do it, because if you surround kids who have a hard time controlling their emotions with other kids who have a hard time controlling their emotions, there is no stability, right? Yep. And then but I was able to get several of my kids, pushed out back into mainstream classes, and one of them actually like fully out of my program. And then I had the luck to be in a low-income school, but in Boulder Valley School District in Colorado, which is the wealthiest school district in Colorado. We're one of the top 2. And so we had a lot of resources, and those teachers were just incredible. And I ran an inclusion program, which is the opposite. It means kids by default are in the class they would be in if they were not in the special education program. And we were able to push in and support them in the class. And so I had kids who would be running down the hall screaming out expletives, and both the kids and the staff in that school were just kind of like, no, that kid's having a hard day again. And they would just get back to work. Yep. And I was kind of like, all these kids are going to know how to work with difficult coworkers later in life. And similarly, it was because of that support of the other staff and that understanding that we were able to get several of those kids out of my program and really have them have real progress. And the kids who stay, and I think like that isn't the default end goal for every kid. Some kids just will always need the support of that program, but at least they were successful being in that program.
And that's okay too. Like 100%, that got winning gold medals and, trophies and things like that.
And that's why I wanted to explicitly call that out, is that it's like, also that's fine. Right. And I will say that towards the end, and this is the impact that my own disabilities, had on this, is that I started to fall apart. I didn't have the emotional and attention reserves to run that program correctly. And in my last year, when I had a much higher caseload, I didn't do a very good job. And so I decided, like, all right, I need to step back from that. I was looking at stepping into administration, and like being a little more like designing the program, even though I didn't have, I was running and I was about to have a child, and I was like, I know I'm not going to have the emotional reserves to do this and come home to an infant. And so I took a job at the charter school network, and my job was supposed to be dean of students, which was the sort of VP and vice principal in charge of school-wide behavior. And the week before school started, they said, hey, our needs have changed. Now you're going to coach the math teachers and be in charge of running 8th grade. And I was like,
charter school, classic move.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I worked at a charter school. And my brother and my sister-in-law worked in charter schools for a long time.
Yeah. And I did that because I was like, well, before I go get a second master's degree, let me try this out, right? Because in education, for those who don't know, every new role requires a master's degree, or a second degree
admin,
in that
credential, or whatever it happens to be. Yeah,
exactly. And so so it was a week before school started. All the jobs were gone, so I just kind of had to roll with it, and I got fired in November. And so then it was mid-year, and really all the jobs were gone. I found one thing 2 hours away for which I would have taken a 40% pay cut. And I went to a code boot camp instead. And so, yeah, I ended up, and my transition into development was, I'm in the boot camp, and, I'm like, all right, they really hammer in, like, you have previous life experience, bring that to what you do, because you're not going to be the most qualified, but you will have other skills. Right. And so we got to testing, and I went, this is a behavior plan for software. I have half a PhD in this. And so that was my selling point. So I ended up getting a job as a quality engineer with Fanatics, the online sports merchandise company. They run NBA and MLB shop and NFL shop and everything. And because that was my thing. I was like, I'm not going to be your most talented software engineer. I have a lot to learn, but like thinking about potential outcomes, and behaviors a system could take, that's my bag. And so that's how I got my foothold in. And then once I was there, they were in the middle of moving from all on-prem C# stuff in Jacksonville, Florida, to all open source languages on AWS. And they had a DevOps team of 3 who were like, we make VPCs, you got to figure the rest out. Um, and so I raised my hand to learn the DevOps stuff, and that's how I ended up in DevOps. And then I did feature work in between there, and was building libraries and that sort of thing. And that was sort of how I got to tech. And then that's a whole further story I can tell, but I'll pause for a second.
Okay, good. No, this is great stuff. And I just think it's really cool to see, because, that you get in this sort of, career lapse or, situation that wasn't planned at all, and thinking on your feet. Can I ask though, like, what was it that triggered, like, I'm going to go to a coding boot camp? Somebody suggested it. You knew someone else who had done it. Like,
I think I'll take a step back, and I said my dad totally has undiagnosed ADHD that he doesn't want to acknowledge. And my dad has. So when I was growing up, when my mom met my dad a couple of years before I was born, he was working as a mechanic at a 76 station.
Okay.
A little bit before I was born, he opened up one of the first VHS rental places in Oakland, California. Anyone who's lived in Oakland, if you ever went to Presto Video, that was my dad. And then he sold that when I was 6 or 7 to invent a batting practice machine because he was tired of chasing balls when I was in Little League. Sound familiar?
By the way, I'm starting a hot sauce company and I'm learning Python. We'll get to that later. That's so true.
So yeah, I grew up with a dad who knew how to pivot.
Yeah.
Right. And that was a life skill that I learned from him. And I'm being completely honest there, right? Like, I'm not even joking. Like, that's a life skill I learned from him. And so, anytime that I've gotten a curveball, I've just kept an open mind and been like, what could I do? And again, you go to the strengths of ADHD is the ability to intensely be interested in a bunch of things in a row. Right. And sort of be like, what's this? Am I interested? That? Nope. What's this? Am I interested? That? Yeah, kind of. Let me go deep. Right. And so, code boot camps hadn't been a thing really when I started my previous educational and career journey. And I'd kind of heard about them on the peripheries. And I was always sort of the prosumer person you came to fix your printer. And I'd made GeoCities pages as a kid. And I grew up going to my best friend's house, whose family was extremely wealthy. And before we could play Monkey Island, his dad had loaded up a script that asked us if we finished our homework before the executable would start. And this is DOS in 1990.
Yeah.
And so I had a little familiarity. Like, command line was not scary. That's how I played Monkey Island as a kid. And we had figured out how to defeat that script when we were kids. And so I had never done more coding, but I was just like, I have a base level of comfort with this. So I took a month where I went through like an online intro to JavaScript course thing while I was applying to the various boot camps to see, like, do I hate this? Didn't hate it. And yeah, so I mean, and then again, it's about knowing yourself. I think there's a self-kindness piece that is like knowing your limitations and what's good for you. And like, I was like, I need a place for the classroom, right? I know I'm going to need the structure. Like, there's so many places that are less expensive or whatever, theoretically more convenient, where you just do it online. And I was like, nope, if I do that, I'm never going to finish it. If I have an obligation to be physically at a place, I will finish it. And so that was part of it too. So I picked like the long boot camp at a classroom.
Yeah.
And that was kind of, it's about knowing yourself and knowing the structures you need to be successful. But yeah, I mean, how I made that choice was purely just like, I can't find a job. What am I going to do? Right.
Yeah.
And just having that willingness to scan the environment and find the most stimulating thing.
No, that totally makes sense. I guess, and once again, knowing myself, like, I've signed up multiple times for online, like, just this week on an online, intro to Python thing. And so I kind of dabble with it. I'm hoping to get through it and then try to take it, because I know what you mean is that unless I have something, chaining me to this, connecting me to this in a way that, it's an obligation that I really have to show up. I know that it's going to be difficult to not just, sort of scrape the surface and then move on to the next distraction. What I want to ask, though, is about someone who's neurodivergent, is that I just assume that, once again, possibly erroneously, because I know so many people with ADHD that are great programmers. The idea for me of sitting down and looking at a command line, terminal, and just seeing numbers and occasional colors and stuff like that seems like it would be a lack of stimulation, but obviously
Totally.
not, right?
Well, so, okay. That's why I was never a programmer, right? Because without a concrete goal, it was just me looking down at a command line with a bunch of the occasional colors and stuff, right? And so like had a friend, like my best friend growing up, the one that, like I'll say he defeated his dad's script. I said we, but I'll give credit where it's due. By the time we were in high school, he was, like creating calculators and, he was getting into programming, getting into computers, and he's an IT professional now on the networking side. I was in a rock band, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was writing poetry.
Yeah.
And
Also-
so, yeah. But again, it's like, that's why I was like, sitting down to do that intro to JavaScript course, my question was not, do I love this? My question was, can I stand this? Right? Like, and the thing for those, and I had a really strong driving force behind me, right? Which is like, I had a 2-month-old son and no job and no idea what I'm going to do in life. You're going to do.
That's a pretty strong motivating factor. Plus, like you said, the pivoting that you saw your dad go through, and then also having friends that are working in tech. It makes sense.
Yeah, I had a mortgage. I had a very good friend who was the head of DevOps at a startup downtown who I could like pick his brain, right? And I will say that every other person I talked to, and this is in person and this is on forums where I've known people for a long time and stuff, were kind of like, this is a terrible idea. But again, that's why I picked the classroom, and I think like what helped there was every month we had a thing we were building, right? Like we had a structure, and a goal to get to, because that's what I need concrete goals, right? And there's a bit of like learning I've had working in tech in the last 7 years now, where it's like, my last position, I was CTO of an early stage startup. And what I learned there is I'm not an early stage guy because things are too open. Like there's not very many concrete goals other than live when you're in an early stage startup. Yeah. And there's a lot of churn and rapidity and turnover, but that also for me, for the way that I deal with my ADHD. And so it's like, I'm sure there are going to be people with ADHD who thrive in that, right? It fits what they need, but like, I can't deal, right? Like I need the structure around me to do well. And so like I found that now on the flip side, I was at Fanatics and we acquired someone and I was on the team that was supposed to like implement some things around the acquisition and merge systems. And there were 3 months where I had nothing to do. Like I literally had nothing to do because they were still like the business people were still figuring out what we should do. And so like we were building a UI library for Vue because maybe that'll be useful when we know what we're supposed to do. But like I quit because I couldn't deal with it. Like there's a level of my sweet spot is like 80 to 200 people, or like 50 to 200 people, where it's like the thing is built, scale it, right? Or like the systems are there, make them better, right? And there are more concrete milestones to get to, right? And there's a bit of structure, and so again, that's where it's like knowing how your ADHD works, because it's going to work differently for everyone, right? And knowing how you can use it. I'm sure this has been talked about, but one of my favorite things is the sort of like hunter in a farmer's world metaphor around ADHD, where it's like this was a biological advantage at one point. It's just not when you have to keep receipts for 12 months for your taxes. And so but I think it's like, I don't take my medication on days when I need to hyper focus on something that I know I can hyper focus on, because otherwise I'll be in the middle of this really interesting thing and I'll be like, I should update the budget. Like it'll interrupt you, it'll distract you from a strength of ADHD.
It's true.
And so,
and also give you the energy to know that like, oh, but it's not a problem if I start jumping to the budget because I have enough energy to be able to plow through it and not estimating correctly. Like, I don't know if you read Cal Newport, but I quote this one a lot. Like he says, like, estimations by definition are at least 50% off. And so anytime you think like, oh, it's only going to take me a couple minutes, that couple of minutes turns into 45 minutes where you get distracted by this YouTube video and I don't know what else at the same time. And anything else under the sun. So I think that's, like you said, knowing how your ADHD works, knowing and being honest about how your medication works, because it's not just like, oh, here's a booster that just makes everything better. It's like, no, it's not going to work that way. And trusting that there are days where, like you said very rightfully, that it's good to take a break.
The thing, a part of getting things done that I had to abandon is the whole rule of like, if you could do it in less than 2 minutes, do it, because I don't know what takes 2 minutes. Like I would end up doing in the get yourself together part of the week, the organize chunk on Sundays. I would end up spending the whole time doing things that will only take 2 minutes instead of actually organizing everything for the week. So I just had to toss that one right out the window. So I think that's the thing is it's like even in programming, I'm still not I don't have hobby projects. Like there are so many people out, like when I have had hobby projects in the past, it's been because I am like, I need this thing, and to do that, I'm going to need to learn this thing. And so I will concretely learn this thing on my weekend so that the next week I've got that skill for this job I'm going to apply for or whatever, right? Like I'm not someone who can just sit down and be like, coding is super fun. Cool. I do enjoy it. Like I don't hate my job. I don't hate it at all, but I also like, I'm not the person who's running Kubernetes at home just because I think it's rad. And I've got like there's a part of me that wants to be the person with like a farm of Raspberry Pis and doing cool stuff. But every time I do it, I'm kind of like, I don't have a concrete use for this. I would just be doing it just to do it. And I'm incapable of doing things just, this is not ADHD related. I think this is just part of my personality. I'm incapable of doing things just for fun. It's like the hardest thing for me to deal with, like with my kid, and to like suppress, because he's a kid and he should be doing everything just for fun. And I have to like actively be like, don't tell him that he's got to do this thing in the Spider-Man game for the achievement, or so, like
it could just be to have a good time and that's it.
Yeah, he and I will be playing Splatoon, together or something, and he'll just spend the entire time just painting the ground, just like in an interesting pattern, and I'm just like, but you're not getting the most of the level. That's my personal prosperity. Again, I don't think it's an ADHD thing. I think it's a me thing.
Whether it is or not, it's okay. And once again, just being aware of it. Now, in terms of your job though, so like you've been a CTO and now working in developer relations, going back to all the stuff you did working in special education, the things that you studied, because like you said, is that, being in a class, classroom management, things about, emotional regulation or dysregulation, having, different profiles, all these different things. To a lot of people, we see these conversations a lot about what are the necessary skills to have. In your case, you have both, being in the technical side, but then also having this really, really strong people side. I'd like to know though, on the people side and the emotional side, if someone's working in management and they haven't really studied human behavior and emotions, is that going to be a downside? Is that going to be a setback for them?
Yeah, because you're managing people.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I know it sounds obvious, but I think to some people it isn't.
Yeah, totally. No, and I'd say that like that's the stronger place where I'm a manager is on the people side, and I'm a terrible project manager, and that's one of the things that I'm very open about. And I'll just say like generally I'm open about all of this in my roles. I tell people very early, and I've done this since I met my wife. Like early on, I was like, I have ADHD, and I'm going to forget to do things, and it's not because I'm going to completely ignore things, and it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I just am very bad at this. And that saved our relationship. But yeah, I mean, so things that have directly transferred. I got a huge education in recognizing my privilege. And before I had that word for it, before that was the thing, that we recognized as a thing, with the kids I was working with, because I worked exclusively in low-income schools, and thought I was going to come in with my amazing experience having, comfort ADHD. And then I was like, you got problems that I know nothing about, but need to learn. And I think even that is just like, it makes you not, you can't function in life without assuming things and having stereotypes in your brain. What you can do is know to question those things. Is to always have a thought and then be like, is that a stereotype or an assumption? right? And I think especially, when we're trying to build out diverse workforces, that's the most important thing you can do. If you're coming from a background like mine, middle class white guy, right? And because I can't stop myself from making those assumptions or having those stereotypes in my brain, I can actively work against them. I think is the most important thing, right? And just constantly questioning yourself in a positive, self-constructive criticism way. Other skills that I think have transferred, honestly, especially, and again, I think this is why I work well in the size of company that I do, is that I worked in the public school system. I can navigate a bureaucracy and get people and identify stakeholders who need to be convinced of things and get them on my side and do that on a long timeline. I think, and that is people above me, people below me, people, at the same level. And one of the reasons I think I ended up in ops is that things operate on a longer timeline, right? Like the platform engineers are not delivering a feature in 4 weeks, a lot of the time, right? And so, I think just like being in special education, if a kid made progress in the 6 years that I had him from kindergarten to 5th grade, like that felt really good, right? And then I came into tech where everyone was like, oh, I spent 3 weeks on this and it's not working. Oh, well, and it's kind of like, all right, well, let's just look on a slightly broader horizon. So, and again, I think that's with people too. Like you might build a feature in 6 weeks, but people don't grow, in 6 weeks. And so when you're managing people, it's about keeping longer horizons and longer coaching, right? And then, I think the other one is just like, I'm not a great listener. I'm not going to, I think by talking. And so I wouldn't even say that listening is one of my best skills, but definitely knowing that I'm bad at listening is one of my best skills. And I think the other part of it is just, it's that self-kindness and self-awareness piece of like knowing what your weaknesses are and being clear about those with people, especially people that you have power over as their manager or as, leader. And they're like, I will tell people like, hey, I'm going to try to shut up and make space. And like, there are times that I know, like I will look back on a meeting and be like, I didn't do that. And I will go to the person and say, I'm sorry, I didn't create space. Is there anything you'd like to tell me now? Or next meeting, like what are the structures I can put in place that next meeting I am not able to take up the space, right? And I'm making sure that people are able to have their voice heard. So it's not about like not making mistakes either. It's about just acknowledging when you made a mistake and like apologizing for it and trying to do better. And if you can't do that, education is full of people who are people oriented. And so if you don't build up those skills very quickly, you're just not successful with the people around you because you'll get called out on it and you just fail out really quick. Almost happened to me. So, yeah.
No, good points all around. And I really admire the part about being a manager, but also being very transparent, saying like, look, like just because I'm in this position doesn't mean I'm perfect. And I think managers go through a fair amount of pressure to not acknowledge mistakes and shortcomings, which I find unfortunate because I will respect somebody a lot more if they own it and say, look, I totally blew it, and being very specific about saying, this is where the mistakes were made. And like you said, how can we build elements into whatever it's meetings or any structural parts of the job to make sure that those mistakes don't happen again. I think that's a really positive point. I think what you said as well about being very transparent with people from the very beginning is something that everybody goes through differently. And nobody wants it to sound like, oh, now you have to give me a red carpet of excuses and that I'm incapable. It's like, no, I'm not asking for that. I'm only telling you that I may need extra reminders. I may need a little bit of extra support here or there. And also encouraging people, whether they're neurodivergent or not, to do the same, about be open about what you're not good at. And then we'll know that. And then we can, try to compensate or maybe delegate some of those tasks to other folks. One thing I wanted to ask though, is that in this particular context with the challenges around getting access to medication right now in 2023, which has affected people in different countries, Is that something, well, first of all, how's it been going for you? Has it been something that's come up at work? What advice would you give to other folks that are going through the same situation?
Yeah. Man, I don't know about the advice part because I'm still figuring it out. But so
Yeah.
the specific, cycle for me recently is it started to be harder to find around October of last year for me, where the pharmacy would be like, well, we're getting that restocked in a week or something, right? And then I'd have a week without it. And then I go get it restocked. And then that became, we don't know when it's going to get restocked, but we'll call you when it's ready. And then that eventually became probably in March, like nope, we don't have it and we have no more quota to get anymore. And I was using the CVS pharmacy near me, which is a big chain in the United States. And so then I started calling the little places and they were all like, yeah, we have it, but only for the people that we've already been dispensing it to. We're no longer taking new patients. And I was like, I didn't know pharmacies
Can do
took
that.
new patients. Like if you looked at it from that perspective, you just go to the pharmacy, you get the medication you need, And so then in March, because April was KuCon. So I'm like, I don't know how time passes. My brain's already smoothed it all over. So March, basically, couldn't find any at all. So I ended up trying to do a month on Ritalin, which I mentioned earlier. I took when I was a kid, gave me really bad anxiety. I had tried taking it before the Adderall as an adult when I was like 20 and told my friends and people around me, hey, I'm trying out a new medication. Let me know if you see any changes. And the feedback then was like, you do not have a sense of humor on this stuff. Like, you're a jerk. And so the way it affected me this time is I got crushing anxiety. There was basically a 3-week period where I was laying on the floor of my office here, doing nothing, because the thought of trying to start a blog article was so overwhelming that I couldn't get up. And again, this is where being transparent has worked for me. Is I was able to tell my boss, like I told my boss when I started the medication transition, and then I got in that place of like, I can't tell anybody. And I didn't tell anybody for the first week and a half. And then a week and a half in, when I was a week and a half late on everything, I had to say like, I'm a mess. And here's why. And to your point, like, and here's what I'm doing about it, right? Like I'm going off. So I'm stopping the Ritalin, but I don't know how effective I'll be. I'm going to drink a lot of coffee and we'll see. But I had I had such a track record of owning things when I had made mistakes, right? Or when things weren't going right, and of getting things done, that my team understood, right? Like you have to have that trust from the people around you. But it was like, cool, we'll pick stuff up for the next week and a half, 2 weeks while you try to figure this out, right? And I was like, I'm going back to my psychiatrist right now. I've already got an appointment. Like I'm trying to fix the situation, but I've been in the middle of the situation. So I went back. My psychiatrist suggested one more pharmacy to call. I called this pharmacy. They were 15 miles away, but they had Adderall. I got another 30-day supply. Okay, cool. I found a pharmacy that has it. 30 days later, I called them and they were like, oh no, we're out now. We don't know when we're going to get any more. And so mid-May, I'm now trying Strattera, which is a non-stimulant medication. I started on the minimum dose, which is like 40 milligrams once a day. In that month, I learned that is not enough. So I've been supplementing with coffee, and stimulants, caffeine, basically. And so I got to and this is where we just get to the, like, when people don't want to mess with medication, like, I understand, because I was about to go on vacation right before or right after this. My first 30-day refill was supposed to come in. I went to see my psychiatrist. He's like, yep, we're going to double it. You'll do 40 morning and night. I'll send the script out today. Great. I go to pick it up. It's still just once a day. And I can't fix it because I would go on vacation for 2 weeks. Thankfully, I was on vacation for 2 weeks. I got back, called my psychiatrist. His office manager said, oh, well, we sent it to that other pharmacy where you got the Adderall. And I was like, that's not my primary. That was a one-off because they had the Adderall. So, okay, well, we'll send it to the CVS. So they send it to CVS. I call the CVS. They don't have the record. I call. So I'm about to run out of Strattera. I run out tomorrow. I called them yesterday and they're like, oh yeah, well, no, okay, well, we gave you a 30-day supply, but for some reason your insurance says it can't be refilled till the 23rd. And I'm like, it was a 30-day supply that I picked up on the 15th. Why wouldn't I be able to pick it up on the 15th? And she went, I don't know. So I called my insurance company, and they gave me an emergency override code that CVS can use to give me an 8-day supply to the official refill date that's 38 days after my 30-day supply runs out. And she was like, okay, well, we can do that, but that means you need to come in on the day that the 30 days would have been up. So now on Saturday exactly, I have to go to CVS. I have to remember an override code for 4 days. And I'm just like, I have ADHD.
Yeah. It's like,
Remembering something for 4 days to be in a place at a time.
Yeah.
It's like not what I.
If you want, I can ping you on Saturday. I can ping you on Saturday to remind you if you want. But yeah,
that'd be great, Bart. Yeah.
No, these challenges in general, but then add the added ingredient of being someone with ADHD. So yeah, I think.
And Strattera is a medication that you have to take every day, or it loses effectiveness. It's not like the stimulants where you take it, it's on, it's off. Like, so I'm gonna miss 2 days. I'm gonna have some of it come out of my system, and it was never quite enough to begin with, right? And so it's just like, so yeah, like I said earlier, I'm on the journey again, and it's just, it's the rest of your life.
It is. And I think that's such an important part. Like you were saying about, management, I really like this as well, too, as someone who, well, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to solve this problem, I'm going to fix it. This is all going to disappear within, it's going to be a 180-degree change in 3 weeks or I don't know what. And not only are those unrealistic expectations, but it's key. It's just not something that, people just don't change that quickly, and in my case, and talking to other folks as well that are, were diagnosed later in life, there's this grief process that goes through like unpacking your entire life and realizing, oh, I did this because of that, or, identity crisis. Who was I really? Was it this? Was it that? Et cetera, et cetera. And so there's all these different, it's not just one process. There are many processes that are going on at the same time.
Yeah.
But with the assumption that these things are just going to change so quickly, and that, if you were a boss and you are also the employee in terms of how you manage yourself, and saying, okay, what are realistic things that I can implement, and that looking at things in a long-term sense, I think that's certainly a much kinder way to go about it. So that's definitely something I take away from this conversation. We are kind of getting towards the end, but is there anything else that we haven't talked about, or resource that you like to mention? I know you mentioned Russell Barkley previously. I know you mentioned the article. I think it's also a book though about ADHD with the hunter-farmer dynamic or dichotomy, right?
Yeah. Hunter to Farmer's World. I don't think it's called that. Oh man, I'll have to find it.
Something
send it to
about
you. Put it in the show notes. Yeah. I'll send it to you. You can put it in the show notes or something. But yeah.
But is there anything else? One thing I wanted to ask is that you like to change the lyrics from songs and make your own versions. That's correct, right?
Yes, I listened to Weird Al a lot as a kid, and that's just a thing. My son likes it. Sometimes he's 7 now. Sometimes he likes it, and sometimes he's like, Dad, stop changing the words. And other times he's like, sing this song, but about our kitty. And so, I don't know. That's just always been, I think that's part of being always on is like, just constantly in that act of like doing things and creating things and stuff, is even when I'm listening to something someone's created, I'm riffing on it and trying to find new expressions of it. But yeah, that's just like, I just can't stop doing it. Yeah.
That's good. Is there anything in that regard that's public, or this is just something you do for yourself?
No, I have to have an audience. I'm really bad at being online. Like I'm really, I'll say,
you're really good at karaoke.
Yes, but I have an audience.
That's it. That's a secret.
Yeah. I'm a performer, and I'm not so like, I don't know. I'm an only child and a Leo, and anything else you want to ascribe to this, but I can't just go onto Twitter when I have 0 followers and say stuff long enough to get followers, or Blue Sky or whatever now, because it's all a mess. But yeah, so there's not a lot out there, but come hang out with me at a conference and you'll see it.
Yeah. That being said, I assume we'll see each other in November in Chicago.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I'm actually trying to, I'm about to start working today on putting together Kubarogi because Leon won't be there.
Good.
So she's giving me her blessing. So yeah.
Good. We have the perfect excuse to collaborate on that. Dave, I've done several conversations now at this point in the podcast. Like I said, I think we're on number 11. I should know that. But I really liked your insights. I really like the amount of depth that you bring to this, and I appreciate your transparency. I'm excited that this will be able to be, seen or listened to by folks on your team, so they get to know you a little bit better if they don't know these things already. And I look forward to future conversations. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think my last word is just highlighting yours, which is be kind to yourself. That is the number one thing you can do with, like you said, in life for anyone, but especially with ADD.
Yeah. Easier said than done. And
yes.
So sit on it, chew on it, do whatever you need to do, but keep it in mind because it's an ongoing thing. And just like with everything, one strategy might work for a period of time, but it may need to be tweaked or adjusted later on. So yeah, great. Thanks a lot,
Thanks
man.
for having me, Bart.
Appreciate it. Cheers.
Yeah, love it.